Hello everyone. Hope everyone has been doing decently. Today's live stream will be playing another set of 10+0 rapid games. Hopefully they're going to be instructive. I expect some, Philidors and e4 with white. Against Sicilians, we'll be playing delayed Alabin. We will see. As usual, I'll leave you guys with the daily puzzle. It shouldn't be that difficult. This one in particular does scream that there's going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble in the back rank for black. And I'll be making sure everything works in the technical level while you guys think about this. Does. Okay. Okay. YouTube chat is not working for some reason. I think it just takes a little bit longer than Twitch. So, without anything else to add, let's go right into it. So one of the first things that you should consider in this position is rook f8 and queen h8 and rook takes g7. Rook takes g7 runs into a counter check. So rook takes g7 check, rook takes g7 check back. Queen h8 doesn't work because of king takes h8, and that's how you, just as quickly as that, kind of reject both of those moves. By the way, I should have said that after queen h8, king takes h8, rook f8, king h7, right? If any shape or form there was a way for black to have a pawn on h7, which doesn't even make sense, because if there was a pawn on h7, then why on earth is queen h8 first possible in the first place? But if there had been in some way a pawn on h7, then rook f8 would make sense, but queen h8, king takes h8 doesn't work. Which takes me to the third and last, which by method of elimination you should be pretty excited to try, and that's rook f8, and that happens to be the answer, because after king takes f8, queen h8, king f7, now we make use of this rook, and we can play rook takes g7 mate. Okay, so let's join the arena. There we go. Oh, monthly Blitz arena. That's attractive. Now we're gonna stick to our slow chess. And yeah. I changed the profile picture of the channel, in case anyone did not notice. There we go, finally. YouTube is not working. Okay, so we're gonna get the white pieces against Peligro. We're gonna open up with e4. Maybe later we can experiment with d4. Black plays d6, which is actually what we play with the black pieces, pretty funnily. And there are many ways you can play against d6. Last time we met bishop c4, and I like this way. It's a way of taking your opponent out of preparation. Simple playing d3, so you've put out your bishop before closing the structure. Bishop in f1 would be known as a bishop inside the pawn structure. And here I have c3 in order to address knight a5. Knight a5 is currently what black is threatening. I also have a3. You may ask, David, how on earth is c3 addressing knight a5? Are you not losing the bishop to the knight either way? If there was a pawn on a6, yes, but because there's no pawn on a6, I would have bishop b5 check. If black plays, let's say, c6, I have bishop a4, and that explains actually the logic behind a move like c3, because after b5, if there was still a pawn on c2, I would have to play bishop b3, but thanks to my pawn being on c3, I have bishop c2, and that bishop is nicely protected on c2. I get to keep that super bishop. This is known as the Spanish or the Italian bishop. Very important minor piece. You would not ideally want to trade this for the knight. And if you do so, then you need to know what you're doing. But in this case, I don't want to do that. I'm going to play I'm gonna play for a slow game with c3. It's reminiscent of a Juco piano, if you guys have heard of that. It's one of the oldest openings, but it's designed to slowly prepare d4 in the future. So by playing d3, obviously we're signaling that we're not going to play d4 anytime soon, but we will prepare it. We're going to finish development first, and then we're going to strike with pawn to d4. Now, I'm rushing here a little bit in terms of explanation. Black did play knight a5, and look at this. Bishop c2. Now we get to use... I mean, c3 is supporting d4, as I just mentioned, but it also creates the c2 escape square for the light square bishop. So we got to use that idea pretty nicely. Black plays bishop e7, continuing with development, very natural. Here I could play b4, knight c6, which may seem very attractive for some of you. And it would be occupying space in the queen side. But at the same time, I'm not too sure about this. I think this knight on a5 is doing nothing. The only reason why I may I may force black to go back to c6 is because I want to prevent c5, if anything. If it wasn't because of that, I don't mind this knight being on a5. Black can remain, that knight can remain there for as long as they want. And I'm not gonna be concerned because that knight on a5 is doing nothing, so the more it stays there, the better for me. But what concerns me once again is c5. So I think I will go for b4, just for the sake of stopping c5, or making it a little bit more difficult for black to achieve that centralization of the pawn structure. I'm going to continue knight f3, they go bishop g4, interesting move. Bishop g4, I haven't castled yet. Usually black goes bishop g4, or the mirrored equal version, which would be bishop g5, once a side has castled. But given that I haven't castled, I can go h3. Bishop takes f3 doesn't concern me at all. Bishop h5, I would have played g4. That was my point. Because I haven't castled yet, I get to move pawns forward. And I don't have to castle anymore, right? I weaken my king, and maybe I go for h4, h5 ideas in the future. But we're not going to get that. My opponent plays bishop takes f3. I'm simply going to take back with the queen. Obviously, taking with the pawn is not only unnecessary, but weakening. Unnecessarily weakening, I could say. So I take with the queen, and now I have the bishop pair. And if you've seen educational chess videos before, you may have heard this like 1,000 times. The bishop pair, the bishop pair. But it is true. I have the bishop pair, I have a strategical advantage. And that advantage is not going to vanish as long as I keep things under control. And I'm careful and I don't do anything extremely dubious and silly. I will get to hopefully convert that advantage. So I have the bishop pair against black's, bishop and knight. I mean, obviously I have a knight as well, but they cancel each other. Okay, so the question is, do I castle short side or am I aiming to go for some sort of crazy pawn storm in the future? I mean, keeping my king in the middle looks interesting, and I can see that being an important way of playing, or an interesting way of playing. You know what? I can't resist. I think g4, g5, h4. But at the same time, I think black could... I don't know. I haven't castled yet, so you know what? I'm gonna go the safe way. I'm gonna simply put my king into safety. And play for the long-term advantage. My opponent goes a5, very logical move, trying to undermine the queen side. But luckily for me, I have b5. If it wasn't because of that, I would be maybe a little bit in trouble, because if I have to take, that's very annoying. For instance, if my bishop was on b2, I would also consider a3, but a3 in this case, given that I don't have my bishop on b2, simply runs into takes. I can't take with the a pawn because it's pinned. So I would have to take with the c pawn, but that also runs into tactics. Knight takes b4, exploiting that same pin. I would be losing. So I'm going to push my pawn to b5 with a tempo. I force my opponent's knight to a suboptimal square. I think knight b8, knight bd7 was probably better, because knight a7. Like, I'm going to play a4 regardless, and... unless my opponent wants c6, which, okay, maybe makes sense. But knight b8 still seemed a little bit more natural. My opponent goes b6. I think this is a bad move, just straight away a bad move. c6, my opponent maybe feared b6. But they shouldn't have, because there's queen takes b6, so b6 is a enigmatic move, as they say. Now, the structure is getting closed. When you see pawns crashing against each other in this fashion, it means that the structure is getting closed. Bishops don't like closed positions. So I'm going to open things up with d4. I'm going to create tension. A move like c4, I'm quite sure, is not extremely bad either. Like, I would still be maybe hoping that my bishop pair is going to activate themselves at some point, but d4 is just a kind of a no-brainer. I can maybe go knight a3, knight c4, and I would be okay. So my opponent plays c6. My opponent breaks... finds a pawn break. Now let's see. Let's take a look at the options here. So I could take... But after knight takes c6... Yeah, I could actually close things off. Because now things are different. Now b6 is very weak. So I can plant a knight on b5. And I think my bishops already have a... By the simple fact that this pawn is no longer here, that means many things. It means that a bishop on d3 is no longer as bad as with a pawn on b5, right? If I play bishop d3 here, let's say black plays rook e8. If we play bishop d3, this bishop is kind of looking at nothing. It's simply defending the pawn on b5. But after c6 takes, knight takes c6, bishop d3 is automatically a decent piece, a decent bishop. So my bishop is no longer crashing against the structure. So that's one thing. Now I talk about keeping the tension very often, and I think this could be one of those moments where, yeah, okay, keeping the tension is probably fine as well. Knight a3, takes. I'm just a little bit worried about opening this, opening the way for this pawn. So in the future, I mean, in the future and right now, actually, after knight a3, takes, that pawn would be considered a passed pawn. And that's scary. Not only that, but my pawn on b5 is attacked and I am defending it. I don't like my pieces to be tied up to the defensive pieces. Pawns, in this case. So I'm gonna take, they take back. I think e takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes c6 would have only helped me. Because then I'm the only one occupying the center, but okay, I would have to play accurately. Maybe bishop b2, maybe queen d1. So knight takes c6 is played. And I must confess, my original idea is d5. My original idea was d5. I could also keep the tension with a move like rook d1. And that can't be wrong. I have a minute left. I have to play a little bit more practically. I'm gonna go for d5. I think this is... There's no way this is wrong. So I gain a tempo. I have to be quick, right? Like chess is a lot about executing your plans before it's too late. Many of us kind of craft these very imaginative and resourceful plans, but then we never get to execute them because we simply forget there's another guy playing. So now I'm getting to suffer the consequences of playing d5, which is my opponent navigating their knight to c5. But I think it's fine. The only thing that worries me a little bit is the pawn on c3. Maybe I shouldn't have played bishop e3. Maybe I should have played bishop d2. Okay, I'm gonna play bishop d2 just to keep things under control. So I lost the tempo. But that's better than the alternative. Sometimes you just have to accept your mistake. And if you are kind of a very... What's the word? Stubborn. If you're stubborn, then you end up in a much worse situation. So I have less than a minute. I'm going to speed up here. Simply going to double in the B file. There doesn't seem to be anyone capable of pushing this rook away other than the knight. So for instance, knight e8, knight c4, knight c7 runs into rook takes b6, I believe. And worst case scenario, like 98, I go rook b1, knight c7, I can simply come back. So now I'm gonna double, creating the primitive threat of rook takes b6. Although there would be rook takes b6, rook takes b6. Okay, we're not gonna get it, but a4 is a little bit weak, so I have to do something about that. I'm gonna play queen e2, free up this bishop on c2 by playing f3. Now this bishop no longer has to protect e4, and let's also keep something in mind, and that is that there's no longer anything attacking c3, so now my bishop gets to apply some pressure against the c5 knight, and we get to take, and that's good news. Now let's say knight c4. We're creating a threat of knight takes a5. I'm expecting some like bishop d6 maybe. I'm playing quickly here just to not lose on time. There are some interesting lines here. And they go for this, which is, I'm not sure, d6? Does this work? I think knight takes a5 is the simplest. I'm attacking this rook, and if they move, that's a disaster. Knight c6 is, I think, winning tons of material. The only question remains is whether we're in time to convert this or not. And we're going to go through the moves that I've kind of rushed in the post-mortem of the game. But yeah, okay, they go for that. Very, very reasonable. I'm going to go a5. I'm going to open things up, obviously. If I get to... Oh, this is very creative. I'm going to go king f1. Of course, the knight takes h3 check was a very big threat, given that my queen was undefended. So credit to my opponent. Here I can take... I don't think knight takes h3 is anything to worry about. I can also go queen f2 if needed. I'm going to go queen g1. This is forcing the trade of the queen. This is, I believe, not working because of this, and c8 is a problem. So let's go here. Queen f5 is a super threat. I think this is... Let's just use everyone. We're going to use both of our rooks and our queen to deliver checkmate. Thank you for the game, Pellegro. Let's go through that before going into our next game. So bishop c4, e5. We essentially got a Italian-ish type of structure, type of game, type of opening. Knight c6 was played and we play c3, and we're happy. I'm happy. Well, obviously, hopefully you're also happy. That c3 is one of the best moves. c3, according to Stockfish 18, depth 30. Knight f3. But bishop e3 is wrong because it allows d5 apparently. I was going to play something like queen e2 here, or takes, and knight f3. Which is also equal, but no longer slightly better for white. So we should have played knight f3 right away. Because after knight a5, there's still bishop b5, and if c6, bishop a4, and if bishop d7, we get to exchange the bishop for another bishop, which is pretty decent, pretty reasonable. So bishop e3 is a mistake, but my opponent didn't punish it. They went knight a5, and then I go bishop c2, and going for knight a5, and not going for c5 is a mistake. If you went knight a5, you're essentially putting my bishop somewhere where it's useful for free. Like, I can see myself playing bishop c2 in the future without being provoked. So knight a5 is a clear... I mean, as long as... I mean, if you don't go for c5, it's clearly incorrect. So the engine actually says c5 here. But now we went b4. d4 was also very reasonable, but b4 is very, very good as well. Knight f3, bishop g4. Yeah, bishop g4... objectively fine, but after h3 you have to go bishop h5, and I'm surprised actually the engine gives this as not dubious. Like, I was gonna go g4, bishop g6, and I thought this was very bad for black, but it turns out to be around equal. I mean, white is still slightly better, but yeah, you have to go bishop h5 because giving up the bishop here for nothing, like just for... You have to have a very good reason to do this, and there's no good reason here. So queen takes f3, calls the short side. Because the short side was correct. Yeah, I wanted to go g4, but then I realized this was too crazy. Black can go d5. Following the principle of if someone or something, if someone is attacking you in the flank, react in the center. Especially because if someone is attacking in the flank, it's very likely that their king is still in the middle. But I castled. They went a5, I went b5, correct. And knight b8 was better, but not a7, a4, and c6 was better here. And after takes, you can actually take with the pawn and find counterplay along the b file. And I think black is probably threatening to go c5 as well. I know, knight c8, knight b6, interesting. But they went b6, and that seems like a waste of a tempo. We went d4, and we have a clear advantage. It's essentially strategically winning here. But I have to be careful. We have to be careful in the way we explain positions. Like, it is winning if it was an engine against an engine, but we still have to keep things under control. So black plays c6, and here we should have played rook d1. Very strong move, apparently. And if he takes d4, I mean, I understand the idea of this, because if c takes b5, d takes e5 seems much better for white already. Black is incapable of taking with the pawn thanks to our previous move, rook d1. We get to take the queen, and we're winning, and that's horrible. But what if they take first? And we simply take back. And we go e5. Wow, very tactical. Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, this is, look at this. Opening both of our bishops, and not only that, forcing this knight away, which is the only defense, the best defensive piece of the king side. So yeah, this makes total sense. After this, we can need to just keep it simple. What if knight takes b5? Wow, look at this move. Chess is a game of double attack. Okay, well, rook d1 escaped me. I played b takes c6, which is also fine, and after knight takes c6, d5 is fine. I was wondering if rook d1 here was better, and it is also playable. It's the second. Actually, it's close to the first, so d5 and rook d1 have very similar evaluation. Both of them are very playable, but we went d5. And after knight a3, we have an advantage. I should have gone rook b1 though, because after rook c8, this is still defended. And by playing bishop e3, I kind of, yeah, I lost the tempo, but my position strategically is so good that we can afford to lose a tempo. That's the power of the bishop here. Black goes knight c5, we went rook b1. And yeah, this was a positional squeeze. This is where we started playing a little bit quicker because time was ticking. Sorry. Knight c4 would have been very strong here. f3 is fine, but not as strong as knight c4. And here, yeah, bishop takes e5 is already working, because usually black wants to take with the b pawn to activate their pieces. But if they have to take with the d pawn, then b6 is always going to be a weakness. I planted a knight on c4. I thought black had to already locate things with bishop d6. I mean, bishop d6 is doing two things. It's not allowing me tactics along revolving around d6, and it's also stopping knight takes a5 now that the queen is defending the rook. But this, after this, is just game over, and the rest is conversion. But yeah, credit to my opponent. Queen g5 and queen g3, all of that is very scary. I had to be careful here. And queen f2 is a mistake according to the engine. I should have simply taken. And after this, just laugh at my opponent's counterplay. And I'm quite sure we would have been able to maybe calculate this, but okay, queen f2 is much easier. Black could have put a little bit more resistance with bishop d6, but after this, we force the queen trade and we're winning. So reasonable game. Let's go back. Hello. Are you the one that donated me? If so, thank you very much. Okay, white opens up with h3. Very interesting move. We're simply going to essentially claim that we're playing with the white pieces now. because h3 and g3 are kind of like, I mean, you could argue neutral moves that don't affect the position that much, but obviously it is. White is claiming that they're playing with the black pieces, but with this slight plus, ever so slight plus h3. It's more of a mind game. Then I'm going to occupy the center with d5, e5. And they do what I expect, which is, not sure what the name of this opening is, but back in my days, they used to call it the baby opening, because you're just moving the pawns one square forward as if you were a baby and you didn't know how to play chess yet, and you haven't found out that your pawns can go actually twice. At least that was the logic I thought behind this. Either way, so hopefully this game proves instructive in the sense that how to punish these openings. So first of all, queen g5 looks very tempting. Queen g5 looks very tempting. I think the only move is probably king f2, after which I could play bishop c5 potentially, but then king g2 and okay. That looks interesting. I pause here in the opening. I could continue with like knight c6 and just knight f6 and play normally. But the reason why I pause is we really want to maximize our chances of punishing this. So bishop c5, e3, d4, e4, queen g5. But then there's knight e2, but then there's d3. This is what I'm calculating. Bishop c5, e3, d4, e4. Because if not, d takes e3 is a complete catastrophe. And then I can play queen g5 in that position, which was the idea I was using here. Now that king f2 runs potentially into d3, check. But okay, I mean, I'm not entirely sure. f5, f4 is an idea. h5, they're going to play h4. I'm almost 100% sure about that. So interesting. You know, I think I'm going to go h5. Wow, they pre-moved e3. The guts. Okay, I'm going to go queen g5 then. I know, but then now they go knight e2. So I think I'm going to simply go h4. Yeah, it's clear that my opponent is taking this way too extreme. I think this is beyond the line where you could play this and potentially defend. I think this is objectively already totally lost. Okay, so they're going to stay true to themselves. Queen h4 already kind of forces bishop g2, I suppose, because g2 is a little bit of a strong. I say a little bit too much of a strong. A little bit too much of a strong threat. d4, e4, f5. I think I'm gonna go f5. I want to go f4. Maybe not now. Actually, f4 takes, bishop takes, queen h4. That would be threatening both queen takes f4 and g2 ideas. So I think I'm gonna go f4. I get to protect my g3 pawn. And if the e-file opens up, then only I can be happy about that. I can support my pawn with g5 later on as well. So they go a3 and they have finished with the wall of pawns. One of them is an imposter. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look. I think I can open things up with f takes e3. I like that. Opening things up can only help me. I think my opponent is finally going to play natural moves now. So f takes e3, bishop takes e3, d4. d4 is definitely a candidate move. I can also play queen h4 and then knight f6. think I'm at the stage of the game where many moves are and should be working. I'm gonna go queen h4. I want to play queen h4 before playing knight f6. So queen h4, bishop g2, and then knight f6. Hello, Eleanor. They go king d2. But I think this is falling into d4. Takes. And we should be winning that bishop by force. There's nowhere this bishop can go. Thanks to this pawn on g3 also, bishop f2 is not possible. The knight was already on e2, maybe bishop g1 would still be putting some resistance, but unfortunately here, it's not gonna happen. So we're far away from the number one spot, and part of the reason is that we take ages playing these games. But yeah, hopefully that this game proves. That's a good example of punishing your opponent from playing such an opening. So we're gonna simply take that, and now, I mean, sure, this is check. We have 1,000 ways of converting this. Probably one of the most clinical ways is queen e7. Exchanging queens when you're up material, exchanging pieces in general. But you know what? I like the idea of keeping queens on the board because I think my opponent's king is unsafer, much more in danger than mine. So they got d4. The idea of this behind this move is bishop c4 check, which could be a little bit annoying, so I'm gonna play bishop e6. I could, I guess, allow it as well. Like I can play bishop d6, bishop c4, king g6. But okay, why would I do that? I'm gonna go bishop e6. Simply gonna develop knight f6, bishop d6, knight c6, put my rooks in the middle. Bishop d6 is kind of a cheapo because it's threatening the obvious bishop f4. Pinning. So I guess knight ge2 makes sense. And then I'm just gonna continue. But my opponent, oof, allows it. And after this, it's just completely, yeah. Thanks for the game. That was instructive, I think. Let's just take a look at how we play this. h5 is, it's okay. Yeah, it's keeps the super big advantage. And after this, it's just, after f3 actually, it's already objectively winning. The engine says queen g5, king f2, and then queen f6. Simply knight c6 and normal chess. Bishop e6. Ah, interesting. So the engine is putting the knight on e7 to take it on f5, exploiting the weakness on g3. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But okay, h5 also makes tons of sense. I was expecting h4, but then I was going to play knight h6, knight f5 ideas. And after this, I went to h4, which was wrong apparently. I should have gone knight h6, knight f5. But okay, I mean, wrong in the sense that it's not the best way to completely exploit this. It allows white to resist a little bit longer with g4, but we still have an overwhelming advantage. But after d3, yeah, this is very bad. I mean, this is... And the idea of f5, f4, is that correct? Yeah, it's okay. There are many ways. This is already -3. Queen h4 is correct, d4 is winning a piece, and it's just game over. Okay, well, let's go back. Okay, we're gonna play with the white pieces again. Let's try with d4. They play knight f6, I'm gonna play knight f3. They play d5. What should we play here? I'm gonna play knight bd2. With the idea of b3 bishop b2 and e3 bishop e2. This is known as some sort of a reti. They go c5, and here my idea was d takes e5. This is something I've actually seen from famous grandmaster Felix Blochenberg from Austria. Hopefully I pronounced that reasonably. And yeah, he actually recommends a3 before put the bishop on b2, and very natural play. My opponent is going for e5 though, so maybe we should keep some ideas against that. So my idea being here, if e5, we're not going to get that, but if e5, I was going to play bishop b5, creating the threat of knight takes e5. And I'm quite sure there's some way for black to anticipate that or do something. But okay, bishop f5, and bishop f5 seems a little bit strange. Doesn't seem like black should be concerned about, I don't know, creating knight b4 threats, because the whole opening is revolving around whether black gets this pawn back or not. So bishop f5 seems like an irresponsible move in that sense. So I can go bishop d3 additionally. Why is this so powerful? I'm creating favorable tension. I don't think black wants to take, because I take back and I play d4, and then look at this. This pawn on c5 is once again getting protected, even against e5, by the way. I get d4, takes. Yeah, there we go. We get it. We get d4. The only bad thing about this is that our bishop is not going to be very good, but okay, for the price of a pawn, that's absolutely fine. And not only that, but my opponent's bishop is not great either. So I'm going to castle here. They're going to castle too. And okay. So I would like to go a3, b4, knight b3, bishop d2. That's kind of my dream. The dream what I want to achieve strategically. But against a3, there's a5. And I would have to eventually play rook b1. So already I'm kind of flirting with the idea of playing rook b1 or maybe a3 and trying to figure out which way is the best. So a3, if a5, I could also just kind of say, oh, psych, a4. Now that you've played a5, you weakened b5, so I'm going to go knight b1, knight c3, knight b5. But okay, firstly, that's a little bit too deep. Secondly, maybe a little bit artificial. On that note, I think I do want my knight on c3. I would definitely prefer it on c3, that's for sure. But should I spend 2 tempos for that? That's another question. Should I just go bishop b3, bishop b2 and kind of accept that bishop is what it is? Actually, I have another interesting idea. I can play knight b3, bishop d2, knight c1, knight d3. And I think I prefer this one over the other two I mentioned, because this knight on b3 is playing some role in maybe keeping an eye on the pawn on c5. Although b6 is still possible. Yeah. Against b6, I'm probably going to have to take and bishop d2 and black has some counterplay, but I think not enough. Not enough to compensate for the pawn. Okay, I think we may be able to squeeze another game. I think it would be a little bit too ambitious too. But one more game would be sufficient. 3 games for a stream is pretty reasonable. So I continue. I took on b6, given that I didn't want... If I had kept the tension with bishop d2, then they take. And I could take with the knight, bishop takes, d takes. That's probably fine. But I wanted to... I didn't want a weakness on c5. So now my plan is knight c1, knight d3 maybe in the future. They go knight b4, which looks very reasonable. But I think I can play a3. I can also play knight c1. I'm going to start with a3. If knight d3, I have bishop c3, and that knight is trapped. So if they have to go back to c6, then it's unclear what they achieved, and a6 is kind of this stubborn move, because it's saying, oh, well, I'm not going to come back from where I come from. I'm going to claim that this knight on a6 somehow is better than on c6, which I don't think is true. But it is the typical chess player behavior of saying, and human behavior of saying, I didn't do that for nothing. I have to... Okay, my opponent goes for knight c6, good for them. I'm gonna improve that knight immediately with knight c1, knight d3. It's surprising what one move backwards can do for the future. As they say, one step backwards and two forward. And now I'm faced with a question. Knight d3 allowing knight takes d2 or playing bishop e1 first. Bishop e1 may seem like a weird move for many of you. Even for me. But it is kind of claiming that if I have enough time in the future, it's a very ambitious move. Because it's kind of saying, look, if I get knight d3, knight f5, eventually I'm going to go f3, and this bishop is eventually going to be better than this knight. However, I don't think it's going to be the case. I think that would take too long. My intuition tells me there's no way we can afford all of those moves. So I'm going to play knight d3 against knight takes d2. Taking with the queen is a little bit annoying in view of knight a5. So should I... Man, this is very annoying, actually. Knight takes d2, maybe? Okay, I'm gonna take with the... I mean, look, I can take and come back as well with the queen, but... At least here we're completely stopping knight a5, because we have b4. So we have to keep an eye on our opponent. That was a very advanced way of thinking. They go bishop d6, very reasonable. So I'm not sure if they're going for e5 or not. For example, if we go b4, they go e5. Do we not have b5? I think we may have. So I'm gonna go b4. b4, indirectly stopping e5. And let's just take a look at our opponent's time management here. Not implying anything yet, but something to be aware in today's modern internet times. f6. So my plan here is... Okay, that's more like it. Yeah, queen h4 is more of a human response here. So we could play f4. I could simply play g3 as well. But I like f4 maybe more. It has the idea of bringing this guy here. Obviously, the threat was made on h2, so I had only two reasonable ways of defending that. I mean, okay, 3. Counting knight f3 as well. But f4 is putting pawns in the same color of my opponent's dark square bishop. I got worried there for a second. Let's not completely relax here. I mean, you shouldn't relax in any context of the game, even if you know for a fact you're playing against a human, let's put it that way. But yeah. So queen c2 hitting the knight, knight e5 is an option. e4 is kind of like the most anti-positional move you can ever think of, because these pawns are nicely neutralizing that dark square bishop. So why would you weaken yourself? I mean, on top of that, you're creating an isolated pawn for yourself. So e4 is out of the question totally. Moves come to my mind like queen e2, simply bringing the rook into the game. F5 comes to mind. This one I think is fine because we can... Like, technically this pawn would have been stopping that bishop and it is opening the diagonal again. But the price they are paying in exchange of that is that maybe we get to open things up in the king side. Lots of options, lots of options. b5, knight a5. I don't want to allow that knight there. That's annoying. So I think I'm going to go queen here. Queen e2. Queen g4 is also interesting, just stopping f6. Queen c2 is hitting the knight. Yeah, I feel like queen e2 is too soft. Okay, I'm going to go knight f3. Knight b3 with the idea of b5. How is that? Okay, I'm gonna go knight f3. I want to kind of, I guess, I don't want to provoke f6, but I guess I'm forcing it to some extent, and then I'm maybe able to exploit e6. And if e6 is a weakness, potentially d5. For instance, if e6 is a weakness, maybe black wants to move it forward, but then d5 becomes a weakness. Very strategical. Became very strategical very quickly. So f6, I'm planning to potentially play queen b3. Bring everyone into the game. I could have done that right away as well. Queen b3. But it's still unclear where I want to put my queen. They go rook e8. Okay, now I'm gonna go knight e5. Part of the reason why I played this, actually. Simply putting my knight on e5. I think f6 was a better move. So obviously knight takes c6 is being threatened. If they have to play something like knight b8 for the sake of keeping pieces on the board, it's definitely losing some important tempos. Bishop takes e5. I'm debating whether I should take with the knight or with the pawn. I think with the pawn because this knight on d3 is better than the knight on c6. Okay, they go rook c8. Whether should we break the tension or keep the tension? That's a question. I mean, taking can't be bad. We can follow it up with a4, a5, creating a passed pawn, and then we should be doing well. I can also play queen a4 actually. Maybe this is why it was worth keeping the tension with the queen so long. I think I'm gonna go for this actually. I'm gonna go queen a4. Now that the rook is not on the a file. So if they play queen c7, then I'm very happy to trade queens because we're up a pawn, and I think we have a pretty decent knight against a bad bishop. The bishop is being neutralized with all of my pawns. Almost all of my pawns are in dark squares. Now, there are two schools of thought when it comes to bishops and putting pawns in the color of the bishop. The first one is you're putting the pawns in the same square, in the same color of the square to neutralize them. And the second school of thought is you're actually putting your pawns and you're weakening them because they're going to be a target in the future of that bishop. So you shouldn't do that. And both of them are correct. But you have to be careful when to use them. Like, it depends on the position, as always. Okay, so we get this position. Now, that bishop is not very happy. We have the open f file. So it seems like we have tons of advantages, but we have to keep things under control. We don't want to overexpand. That can backfire very quickly. So, how do we do this? Where should we play? Queen side or king side? So queen c6 allows bishop takes c5, I think. Rook a c1 or rook f c1? I think I want my rook on the f file for now. So I'm gonna play rook c1. Tactically rook a8, I think I'm gonna play queen c6. Because queen a8 or queen takes e8, the queen sacrifice doesn't seem sufficient. Although, very interesting. But unnecessary, completely unnecessary. So rook a8, I'm gonna play queen c6 potentially. And it's very tempting to go for some sort of queen sacrifice. But we're gonna keep our hopes and dreams of doing that controlled. So here I'm gonna pin the bishop, I think, with queen a7. That looks strong. I can also just play queen c6. I have to hurry up. I'm gonna play queen a7. So queen h4 obviously just drops the bishop. My idea is b5, knight b4, I guess, but I can also slowly improve my position with g3, king g2. I can also just go rook c6, rook c1. Tons of options. Actually, the last one I mentioned probably proves easiest. Putting a pawn on b5 is in my agenda, but maybe not for now. Like, I wouldn't be particularly scared if black plays that move themselves. I think it's more important to bring this rook into the game. Rook f2, rook c2 is also possible. Actually, if anything, interestingly, maybe rook f2 is the way. Okay, now this is definitely bad. Because this pin is very annoying. Ah, but bishop d8. Wow. But I can sacrifice, I believe. Wow. Okay, now we have this eternal stuff going on. Rook b8 is kind of the only move. Actually, nothing was threatened. I could have played b5. Terrible. Obviously, the intention of queen b7 is the fact that for some reason I thought that this bishop was being threatened to be... my opponent was threatening to move the bishop, but then rook takes c8 is still a very big problem, so that was not right. Okay, so I'm gonna go b5, knight b4, knight c6 now. Knight b4, knight a6 is obviously also a concern. Should be a concern. My opponent. And it all comes down once again to whether my opponent should... Sorry. My opponent is in time or not for survival, I guess. Rook b8, queen c6. Okay, this allows knight a6. Now we should be cashing in our advantage. Bishop e5, queen c8. I mean, rook c8 probably works as well. Okay, that one, I think the easiest is this. We do allow a check, but we simply step back. And now black has to do something about this whole situation here. I'm gonna take the... Actually, this is a good question. Knight takes c7, I think, is the easiest. Because this rook is being lost either way. If we had played queen takes c7, bishop e5 is still a little bit annoying. Here I'm gonna take, and then rook f1. And even though my back rank looks pretty unsafe, my opponent's king is even more. Thank you for the game. Yeah, that was interesting. I thought for a second there that my opponent was coming up, like creating some sort of majestic plan of coming back, and I got concerned. For instance, like from this part of the game onward, this knight b4, like I thought my opponent's intention was always to provoke a3 with the idea of coming back and playing knight a5, and that was very... I became paranoid. Which, yeah, embarrassingly. just to take a look at the engine. So knight c6 is superior. I was saying that a human very likely would have gone 96, but my opponent was good at preventing that. Okay, well, interesting. Let's take a look at the whole game. So d takes c5, this is part of the idea of this opening, as I said. According to Felix, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Whenever black goes c5 in these openings, you take and you go a3, b4. So I followed it up with e3, and after bishop f5, we already have some sort of advantage. Now, bishop d3 wasn't as strong as I expected. It is reasonable, but knight d4 would have been stronger. I just didn't know what to do against bishop d7. The engine simply says a3, and after e5, now you take, play b4, and knight b3, knight a5 is in the cards. And then after a5, you go bishop b2 simply. So yeah, but after, part of the reason why the engine doesn't like bishop d3 as much as knight d4 is that black has e6, which did not happen in the game. Bishop takes e3 simply gives black a losing position. Okay, it's still not losing, but a much worse position. And knight b3 was wrong. I should have gone b4 right away. Very instructive. Knight takes b4. I was concerned materialistically, but I simply have queen b3. After a5, a3, knight c6, we're getting back the pawn. Yeah, I did not see that. That seems like a very good trade of pawns. Like, essentially, by using tactics, we're getting what we want. And this is what my coach used to tell me all the time. Use tactics at the service of strategy. So, strategically, you would want these pawns to be traded, right? Because then the pawn on c5 is passed. And that's a problem for black, because that pawn is passed, right? It's a passed pawn. It's a very big problem. So we play b4, and through tactics, we're doing that. I failed to see all of that. I play knight b3, and then, yeah, I mean, we played okay. Knight takes d2, bishop d6. Yeah, this is all fine. Queen c2, rook c8, rook fc1 is what the engine wanted, because these tricks are not working. But I didn't want to allow any of those. And knight f3, according to the engine, would have been stronger. And then queen b3. It's fine, kind of interesting to see that the engine doesn't want to put pawns in the dark squares. I play knight f3 here. Queen a4. Bishop takes e5 would have been a little bit more resilient. But after this, and especially after this last move, bishop f8 would have been better. But bishop c7, this bishop has no future anymore. It's always crashing against e5, and f6 is... Actually, this is interesting. f6, I think we simply take and weaken the king to such a degree that we can actually redistribute our pieces and start attacking the king. Rook a1 is correct. Queen c6 would have been better, but queen a7 is also playable. Queen b7 would have been correct here, because then we prevent rook d7. But allowing it is fine. And then queen b6 here, yeah, of course. I failed to see this. And yeah, here black should have tried rook b8. But okay, thank you for the game, opponent. Sorry, I mean, sorry but not sorry at the same time, because you never know. But thank you for sure. Thank you for the game. I was gonna say sorry for suspecting, but can you really blame me in this today's chess economy? Well, thank you everyone. Hopefully that was instructive. I'm gonna write down the time codes on the description of the live stream. We got actually 2 games, one with white, 2 games with white, one with e4 and the other one with d4. So hopefully that proves or provides with a little bit more material than usual. And our usual Philidor and like endless delay development. But yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good one.